Oh man, all of India's football problems will be solved now because we have ISL. Man, ISL is fucking doomed. We need to fix a bunch of problems, otherwise we are Before we jump onto the video, let's get into the history of ISL. So this ISL season is going to be the 9th season of the Indian Super League. So about 8 years ago, we built ISL with the view that we will have a very strong top-down approach to football in India. We will create a strong professional league. Each of the teams in the league will have very good infrastructure, developmental infrastructure, academies. They will have a great pipeline of players coming in. And as the players come in, the youth and the grassroots will automatically improve. So in essence, the idea was in this pyramid, we start from the top and we keep investing the way down. And as the middle and the base becomes stronger, the whole ecosystem becomes good. But at the moment, the investment was predominantly at the top level, which is the professional league. So historically, that's how ISL has taken a view. Of course, some good progress has been made. Number one, we have 11 professional teams that play professional football outside of the I-League teams. So that's a good thing. Each of these 11 teams have good sort of infrastructure, decent academies, and a decent pool of players coming in. If I'm a kid wanting to play football and if I have some decent talent, I can find my way into these academies. And of course, there are some private academies as well. So good academy structure has been built. And of course, there are 11 professional teams. Those have B teams as well. So if you really think about it, about 50 to 100 players between senior players and youth players are within each of these academies. And multiplying that with 11 teams, we have a good pool of players. Of course, Reliance has its own academy, which is the owner of the league, and there's a good pool of players there as well. So these have been some of the positives of ISL so far. But now let's look at some of the issues. And my personal estimation is that around $400 to $500 million has been spent in the last 8 years, or I should say has been invested in the last 8 years to create this outcome. Now, if you really see the effectiveness of $500 million being spent to create this outcome, 11 teams, some academies, maybe 700,000-800,000 players playing in professional outfits. Is it the best use of the money? I mean, maybe not. Overall, India's national team ranking, the men's team ranking is more or less the same. We were around 100 or 110. Before ISL started, we are 106 as of yesterday. More or less the same. No much significantly better players are not come out from the pipeline, unfortunately. The quality of players is kind of the same when we look at the Indian outfit. Of course, other countries are also investing heavily, so relatively we are more or less at the same position. And if you really compare the performance of an ISL team with an average I-League team, it'll probably be similar, maybe 10, 15, 20% better in the case of ISL team. So I don't really know if this money that is being invested, which is $400 to $500 million, is it really been worth it or not? Bear in mind, a lot of this money has gone abroad to marquee players, international players, consultants, agents, lawyers, and you name it. But of course, all of this is a long-term game. You know, when ISL started, I was one of the people talking to everyone saying, let's give it 15 years, let's give this 20 years. But we are almost at the halfway of that long-term plan, and I just don't see any significant progress. And in my opinion, the reason for this is 3 structural issues. Unless we solve for these 3 structural issues, long term, we are not going to make progress in football. In fact, we will keep becoming even more messy administratively and structurally. Number one of the structural issue is a broadcast rights conflict of interest. Now, this is an important issue to solve in the long term. So the situation is that Star Sports, which is a broadcaster of ISL, is actually also a co-owner of ISL. Now this creates a unique conflict of interest. First of all, let me just qualify this by saying I am not bashing Star Sports here, because very few investors were willing to invest in Indian football, let alone very few broadcasters. So at a time where Indian football needed a push of support, push of marketing, push of investment, Star Sports raised its hand and said, we are going to do this. Now, of course, that came with a big conflict. The issue here is that the rights of Indian football, the broadcast rights of Indian football, need to go out in the market, and the best bidder needs to win the broadcast rights, period. Whether it is high, low, medium, it does not matter. In the long run, it's critical that if the sport is growing, the rights need to be fairly distributed and the money needs to come into the league. Currently, the rights are automatically with Star Sports. Of course, that structure kind of changes after 10 years, but let's see how that really pans out. I would love to see a fair bidding for these rights. That's issue number one. Issue number two is absolute crazy unsustainability for franchisees. Franchisees have lost money from day one. They continue to get butchered and rogered. Every year, franchisees are losing crores of rupees. In the first few years, most franchisees lost between 40 and 50 crores a year. And even today, each franchise potentially loses between 15 and 25 crores. Single biggest reason why franchises are losing money is the talent to wage ratio. If you look at the talent of football in India and the money that we pay them, that ratio is probably going to be highest in the world, or at least one of the highest in the world. So in essence, our players are getting so well paid based on the talent that they have, is that it's creating unsustainability for the franchises, for the teams. And we need to fix this. I'm all for players making money. Trust me, I'm all for fucking players making money. We want our players to make money, but not at the expense of the sport becoming unviable. If this league is not viable, who the is going to pay that money? I mean, at the end of the day, the players need to get to a point where their talent, where their wages justify the talent, and they're just not getting paid just for the fuck of it. And that's one of the biggest problems. If the franchises create a sustainable model, the sport can organically grow big time. If the franchises continue to lose money, they will keep folding like they have been over the last 8 years. If you look at the franchises that have folded, KBFC, I think they've changed ownership. Northeast is in trouble. Like, there's a lot of clubs that have just changed ownership, and that is the problem. And the wage bill is the biggest problem. The last and the third issue is invest in other parts of the pyramid. We have taken a top-down approach, fair enough, but don't lose sight on tier 2 and tier 3. Don't lose sight of tier 2 and tier 3. We said top down, it means we have to get to the bottom at some point. We are investing so much money on professional sport. We are doing nothing for youth, and we are definitely doing nothing for grassroots. Where the hell are we going to create a pipeline of players? How the hell are we going to build the base and the ecosystem for our sport? We just keep pumping money to players who exist and do nothing for the others. Just having small 11 academies and one central academy from the league is nowhere close to enough. Nowhere close to enough, given how big our country is. You think that 1,000 players playing in those academies is enough? We need 1 million players to be playing. And for that, even 5% of the budget coming down, trickling down from the mammoth 500 million that is being spent up top would have really helped. It's not the league's responsibility to govern the sport. It's the federation's responsibility to govern the sport. But it's another video and another issue that we talk about, how league completely controls the federation. And I'm not saying it in a wrong way. Federation gave up all their rights for some money, which is fair play because federation wasn't able to raise much capital without structure. But at the end of the day, we have this structure, and somebody has to raise their hand and say that we keep investing at the top and nothing comes from the bottom. How is this really sustainable? How do you guys think that in 10 years we're going to have a pool of players that will continue to play and raise the bar for Indian football? Of course, some good things are happening, but of course, lots of fucking bad things are happening. A lot of them. Fix this mess, otherwise we are going to be continuing in this mess. We will not be in the top 106 like we are today in the next few years. So, fix the fucking broadcasting issue. Make franchisees sustainable and invest some money in the second and third tier of the pyramid. If these three structural issues are not fixed, Indian football will continue to be That's all I will say. So that's the situation, guys. It's a grim situation, don't get me wrong. I love our football. I love my country. I've invested my life in football. I've invested last 12 years of my life supporting grassroots football. This is what I stand for. This is how I make a living. We will be fine. The individual players like us, small players, we will be fine. But if we really want to fix our football, we have to all raise our voices and try to fix these bigger issues. It's just easy to say that it's not our problem. But at the end of the day, just raising our voice is creating enough noise for the people in charge to potentially take some note of this. That's all, you guys. If you loved my video, consider subscribing to my channel. If you enjoyed it, I will settle for a like. For all kinds of sports content, Indian sports content and Indian sports business content, you can follow me and my pages. Ciao.